and welcome to Poems On. This is the second in a series of poems on music. I'm Al Basile, and I'm happy to have as my guests today A.E. Stallings and David M. Katz. Alicia, would you please take the pride of place and get things rolling for us?
Well, thank you, Al, for having me on the show. It's great to see you and David in this way. I thought I would start by what is probably my most published poem, because I think at one point Poetry Magazine sent it out on a postcard. So it is the one thing that will survive of me. It's a triolet or a triolet. So it's 8 lines long. And I think it was one of the first things I wrote after the birth of my first child, because I thought, I'm not really going to be able to write anymore. But I was always pacing up and down with this colicky baby. This sort of happened. And the great thing about a triolet or a triolet is that the lines repeat. And then if you steal one of the lines, you only have to write, 5 lines or something. And I guess I had the memory, maybe from music, from orchestra or something, of this line being ascribed to Martin Luther: "Why should the devil get all the good tunes?" Because of course he took in theory, all of these, barroom songs and turned them into wonderful hymns. It turns out I was wrong about that, but I thought if I just put in the title "Triolet" on a line apocryphally ascribed to Martin Luther, I would have myself covered. So it's a short poem with a long title. Why should the devil get all the good tunes, the booze and the neon and Saturday night, the swaying in darkness, the lovers like spoons? Why should the devil get all the good tunes? Does he hum them to while away sad afternoons and the long, lonesome Sundays, or sing them for spite? Why should the devil get all the good tunes, the booze and the neon and Saturday night?
Thank you.
Well, I almost know that one by heart because it was on my refrigerator for a long time. I love that poetry mag. It's the best promotion poetry magazine has sent out. And I had, it sounds like a jig to me, and it probably should. It also makes me think of what William Blake said about Milton, that he was of the devil's party without knowing it, of Satan's party without knowing it. So in other words, all the life of Paradise Lost is in Satan, and similar kind of thought, I guess. And I'm going to call an audible, since you talk about walking your child, walking your infant child, and your thoughts on that. So I have a poem about that, which is based on a great song from the American Songbook from my favorite lyricist, Johnny Mercer, called Moon River. And it's about walking an infant and at 3 in the morning and trying to get him to sleep. I can read it now because I have an announcement. If all goes well, I shall be a grandfather for the first time on Friday.
Wow.
So my son, this little infant in here, will be, his son will be returning the favor, so. Lullaby. I sing Moon River, comforting our hearts temporarily. Out of the night, the 3 beats of the whippoorwill have come to tear me from my sleep. They are your cry. Shattered, we pace the cold linoleum, settling in, holding on for life. We will go forth upon the placid river. I start to dream. 2 huckleberry friends, paddles pulled up in our patchwork boat, at peace beneath the Mississippi moon. We're no longer on the lam, you from your wet and lonely crib, me from the muddy shore of my new fatherhood. The riverboat gambler with a thin mustache is free to rule the night. We're free to float out west, unimpeded, unobserved, complete, until we get to where the past began, until the dawn. Our walk is shortening, our breath is slowing to a halt, a hush, and you relax into a heaviness on my neck. I wonder if it's time to walk you back into your room, to lay you down with all the silence, all the absence I can muster. Let you go into your wide and sleepy river, tiptoe out and shut the door. I wonder if it is too soon for that. If as I turn to leave you in the dark, you will awake and refuse to let me go. We stop, and then I start to hum the song, and we both expand, two drifters sleeping where we stand, not yet divided at the rainbow's end.
How old is your son now?
He is 38. And he's getting to the point where he can do that with me, too. So I'm a little too heavy for that.
Well, I'm in excellent company, but also alien company, because I have no children and I have not been gotten up in the middle of the night for that reason. But just flashing back on Alicia's commentary about the good tunes and the devil, I guess Martin Luther had beer drinking songs in mind when he was talking about the tunes. Did you have some other kind of music in mind when you were writing it?
Not really. I mean, I mean, it's, within the poem. Yeah, I think it's kind of a honky-tonk kind of poem. It's a poem that's actually been set to music many times, and that's been very interesting for it to go through that almost backwards process of being about tunes and
Sure.
being turned into a tune.
Well, that's good. It's a good segue for me, because I picked up on the devil's music to reach back for a poem that I wrote about a meeting I had back 40 odd years ago, 45 years ago, when I was on the road playing, and the band I was in opened for Howlin' Wolf at a blues festival. And I loved Howlin' Wolf, but had never met him. And this is a poem about the occasion of our meeting. It's called Blues Primeval. And it was written on New Year's Eve, actually, in 2017. His mother threw him out when he was 10. She sold her own handwritten gospel songs for pennies on the street, would not abide his wanting to sing blues, the devil's music. Ain't no love like your mother's love, he'd say later in life. I missed a lot. Just days before he died, he asked his wife to call long distance to his mother. If he ever needed her, he said, the time was now. His mother heard her only son's request. She put down the phone and walked away. A year before his end, we opened for Wolf and his band in Burlington, Vermont. His kidneys had been damaged in a crash, and he had shrunk down 60 pounds or so from the 300 that he'd bragged about. The every other day dialysis at VA hospitals along his tour routes got him through to every other night. He'd only do 6 songs, but he still crawled on hands and knees and lolled the mic between his legs and cooed and howled, ever the wolf, an elemental force of nature. I saw him sitting by himself backstage after his set. and felt the need to talk. At rest for now, he was approachable, burned down body banked back to a stillness, voice thinned to a thread, unthreatening. I asked him about Aberdeen, where he'd been born, and did he ever go back there? That's my home, he said, as though that was an answer. Well, with all you have to go through every day to keep this up, I said, you must love to play. His great gray head turned toward me then. Lizards of flame flashed up into his eyes, his face. Up down stage.
Mhm.
He died the following summer.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was extraordinary to me that in those days, dialysis was an all-day affair. And so his tour route was a hospital one day, a day to recover, an evening set, drive to the next hospital.
Wow.
Just extraordinary. You're next.
Let's see. So I, at one point, I did play a fair amount of music, and in college I was a music minor.
Really?
But I still have nightmares about, showing up and not knowing my part. And this poem is about instruments, and it's called Two Violins. It has a similar theme in some ways, this idea of devil's music and God's music. So perhaps it kind of comes off of that. It is out of an actual experience of, being taken to a violin maker and being shown two instruments and which one I chose. And I still have this violin, which reproaches me daily from its keys. So this is called Two Violins. One was fire red, hand carved and new. The local maker pried the wood from a torn down church's pew, the devil's instrument wrenched from the house of God. It answered merrily and clear, though my fingering was flawed. Bright and sharp as a young wine, they said, but it would mellow, and that I would grow into it. The other one was yellow and nicked down at the chin, a varnish of Baltic amber, a one-piece back of tiger maple, and a low, dark timbre. A century old, they said, its sound will never change. Rich and deep on G and D, thin on the upper range. And how it came from the old world was anybody's guess. Light as an exile's suitcase, a belly of emptiness. But that was the one I chose, not the one of flame. And teachers turned in their practiced hands to see whence the sad notes came.
I love that one. Thank you. So it was grounded in a choice that you made, and you still have that instrument.
I do.
Now, what kind of music did you play on it? Were you in orchestral settings, or?
Yes, I was. I was in college. That kind of particularly sad creature, first desk, second violin. And
I've been there. I've been there with the trumpets.
But I was also in college, was in Athens, Georgia. Now I'm in Athens, Greece. And it was a time when there was a lot going on musically. And I discovered that while it was kind of sad and nerdy to drag my violin to orchestra practice, it was really cool to go to band practice. And there were, everybody, went to Athens, Georgia. As a friend of mine, Ashley Cooper, a painter, said, she's like, you go to Athens to flunk out of art school and become a rock star. So there was a lot of that energy there where all of these people would start bands. They wouldn't know how to play. I mean, sometimes they would not even know how to tune the instrument. So I suddenly kind of jumped from being this like nerdy kid on the back of the bus, you know, talking about classical music to, you know, like, could you hand me that guitar? I'll tune it for you. And, you know, it was kind of cool to be able to go to band practice and sound checks and stuff like that. That was much more fun, it turns out.
Well, I can tie into that, but not until David takes the next shot at it here.
Right, I'm really improvising now with what I hear from Alicia. Talking about the two Athenses, and I can only talk about New York City, which I seem to be talking about obsessively more and more as it retreats from me outside my window. And not being a musician myself, I enter into music passionately, but as a appreciator. So this has a reference. There's also a reference to Georgia at the end, and not Ray Charles's Georgia, but Gladys Knight's Georgia. And since we're all we're obsessed with Georgia now.
Yes.
In the Georgia election, it got into this poem called "Walking Up 34th Street." I have been walking here for many years. When I say here, I mean New York. This walk up 34th Street to the West Side train. I've drunk 2 bullet bourbons with the new firm's management. I'm 68, a weird new individual on this strange earth. There is a haze ahead of me this late June dusk. The guys and dolls are all decked out in wine or teal, in mauve and sweet pastel. Their pleats pressed razor sharp, their golden chains glinting on their necks, their headsets tuned to songs anticipating paradise on earth. By paradise, I mean what comes of first paychecks, first dances at a club, on evenings they can justly call their own. I am not new to this, though I can still recall a Bloody Mary and a rack of spicy ribs, relive a bar in the long ago when Gladys Knight and all her pips redeemed the past on midnight train to Georgia. I have been walking here for many years. The night is filled with possibilities.
That dates you, you know.
I've been dating myself.
Midnight Train to Georgia is, what is that, 68?
Oh, yeah. No. It's like...
It's later?
Early 80s, late 70s.
Really?
Yeah. It was a huge hit. It was on every jukebox. You know.
Oh, yeah. I remember the tune. I never... Years are harder for me to place. I've been listening for so long. Well, I'm going to build a little bit off the idea of orchestral playing that we heard a bit ago, and read a poem that's actually about. It represents my feelings towards the HIP movement. The HIP movement that's historically informed performance. And over the last 30 years or so, it's become increasingly popular for classical ensembles and also soloists to play music, period music, like Baroque music, on the instruments that were in use at the time, many of which still remain. And beyond that, to use what we know of the practices on those instruments. So for instance, the violins are tuned slightly lower. The pitch for A is not 440, it's closer to 430. Instead of having steel wound strings, the violins have gut strings, and you get a different sound. Well, it's produced this sort of withering crossfire between people that like to hear that music done with modern ensembles and modern instruments, and those that insist that if you don't do it the way that they did it back then, you're inauthentic. So I wrote this poem and sort of revealed my own position. It's called Other Waters, and it has a nod to the famous Heraclitus quote about not stepping into the same river twice. Other waters. If we could hear what Haydn heard, we'd hear it differently. For Haydn hadn't heard a note from recent centuries. His tones evoked a world that he was privileged to see. But we have heard the chimes at midnight's darker far than he. Chaos in his creation seems mere consonants to ears benumbed at clashing intervals repeated over years. As we have lived through ages of advanced anxiety, so music's given voice to faithlessness and cruelty. Yet Haydn smiles, spreading l'aurore over our benighting. Through Haydn's eyes, surprised, we find how sunnier the lighting. Living in this millennium with all that it provokes, how badly needed are the laughs we get from Papa's jokes. If we could step farther upstream into past history and shed our memories, there might be true authenticity. But as it is, we have to make contemporary art some closer flowing parallel and current counterpart. Gut strings or steel alone don't make our efforts laudable. It's only playing in his mood makes Haydn audible.
I loved the over-alliteration in your first few lines. It's very funny. The H's.
All the H's.
Yeah,
That was great.
I love that.
The only advantage that you'd have reading this on the page is that l'aurore is the nickname that was given one of Haydn's string quartets. It's called the Sunrise Quartet.
Yeah.
And so you can see that in italics on the page. I hope my fractured French pronunciation made it still somehow comprehensible.
Not Lahore, Pakistan?
No. Okay, good.
Excellent.
I like our flow.
I also realized the Georgia thing, I mean, also holds for Mercer. So we've got.
Yes, it does. Well, it's funny because you have the Mississippi in that poem, but there is actually a Moon River just outside of Savannah.
Small river near him.
Yeah, and that's where Mercer grew up. So that's where he got the name, at least.
Beautiful stories in Mercer's biography about that, about him loving that river, you know, and that being his private river.
Did you read the Philip Furia one or the other one, or both?
I think I read the Philip. What was the other one?
The writer escapes me, but they were both.
I did. Well, that anecdote comes through. That was probably in the Philip Fury. Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm up again. Is that?
You are again.
Well, I was thinking, I'm realizing now how many poems I have that are about music, because I sort of had a set list, but I keep wanting to change my mind, you know, to interact with things that y'all are saying. Just that idea of tuning and the 440, that actually comes into one of my poems, which I think might also be a good poem to read because it's about going to museums and to concerts and things that I have not done much of the last year, as I think it's true of most of us. And that feeling you get when you, at the beginning of a concert or when you walk into a museum. So it's called Prelude, not a very original title perhaps, but. Lately, at the beginning of concerts, when the first chair violin plays the A440 and the bows go whirring about the instruments like wings over unfingered strings, the cycling fifths, spectral arpeggios, as the oboe lights the pure torch of the note, something in my throat constricts and tears are startled to my eyes helplessly. And lately, when I stand, torn ticket in my hand in the foyers of museums, I surprise you with a quaver in my rote reply. Again, I overbrim and corners of the room go prismed, dim. You'd like to think that it is truth and art that I am shaken by, so that I must discharge a freighted heart. But it is not when cellos shoulder the tune, nor changing of the key, nor resolution of disharmony that makes me almost tremble. And it is not the ambered afternoon slanting through motes of dust a painter caught 400 years ago as someone stands opening the blank future like a letter in her hands. It is not masterpieces of first rank, not something made by once warm fingers, nothing painted, played. No, it is something else. It is something raw that suddenly falls upon me at the start, like loss or awe, the vertigo of possibility, the pictures I don't see, the open strings, the perfect intervals.
Wow. I don't know that one. Is it in one of the books?
It's in Hapax. I almost never read it. I think it's not one of my ones that I do at readings. It is really very music specific. And so a lot of the tropes, that's, I think one of the great things about failing at something as a poet, I'm a failed musician, is that you do get all of that wonderful jargon and argot and tropes and metaphors
Sure.
without necessarily all of the practice hours.
Well, I'm glad that the topic brought that out of you then, because we wouldn't otherwise have had a chance to hear you read it.
What's the title of it, Alicia?
It's called Prelude. It's in Hapax.
It's wonderful to listen in this setting. I'm so struck by the perfect pitch you have in the poetic line. That line about the quaver. There's such a music there. I mean, you're hearing a wonderful story, but you're hearing the master of ear in poetry. So I'm enjoying myself.
I don't think I've ever seen you well up, though. It's quite a task for the imagination.
You don't want to be there. It's not a good thing.
Okay, point taken. What's up, David?
All right, Al, your poem really about Haydn huffing happily, unhappily. Originally, this poem, in a strange way, is somewhat about that. It's actually a description. You may have seen this on YouTube. It's one of those evenings at the White House, but it was with Obama. And Obama had the greatest evenings at the White House.
I did see it.
Yeah, I think it was either R&B or about Otis Redding. And Cyndi Lauper was one of the performers there. And as we know, we're back in the South with Otis now, Otis Redding. So Cyndi Lauper took it on herself to perform Try a Little Tenderness, which is such a classic Otis Redding. It may be the classic Otis Redding song. And as she started, I say, hey, this is not going to happen. This is going to happen. So the tension is it's about the imitation. It's about matching the old master. Now this poem made me very sad when I read it during the Trump years, because there was such a beautiful vibe in that room with Obama. But now more hope is on the horizon, so maybe Cindy will come back. Cyndi Lauper sings, "Try a Little Tenderness for the President." Still something of her skips upon the scene, like a girl who just wants to have fun. But it's a burst now, a channeling, not me, Cindy, but Otis, or rather a channeling of the song itself. Mauve at the throat, lace-up boots, spikes from the head, rounder, now a being of a certain age, not a girl precisely, not a boy, but both, almost muscular, singing, "Young girls, they do get weary. I want you to try a little tenderness." And I root for her. I want her to carry it off somehow. And she does not fail me. She is no gender but conviction. She is a preacher counseling tenderness for the tender. Back and forth across the stage, perfectly reproducing the electricity of the singular, each breath on each note, but somehow under Otis's performance now over it slightly, shadowing it. There will come a time when performance will have to match performance, when mimicry will have to exceed itself, become her singing of the song, or fail and fall back into mimicry. And it comes with Otis's scat, when he goes deep into his bass and comes up with a rasp that explodes beyond the histrionic. And Cindy tries to match it, begins to fail, but then lifts up to the forward movement of the song. Got to try a little tenderness. And she skips like a stone into a standing ovation from the president and from Sasha and Malia, the radiant Michelle, and she is wrapped into celebrity. Oh, Janice, god of impersonation, tell me now, did Cyndi Lauper really nail that song?
I love no gender but conviction. That's wonderful.
Oh my! I couldn't have had a more apt segue to the one that I'm going to read next, because it's about what it means to sing, at least to me.
Wait, it's there. It's Amazon giving me a fake phone call.
Oh,
So
okay. This is called "To a Young Singer." Is it because you're young that when I hear you sing, I can't tell who's behind the words? Your voice is blank and reedy, scrubbed of region. And when you sing of life, I don't believe you've lived through the ordeals you sing about. When I listen to a song, I need to feel I know who's bringing it to me. Like, I'd listen to a tale of woe across a table in a quiet bar because I liked the guy, knew he couldn't help himself. He was so full of what had happened, he just had to tell it or bust. I'd do that for a friend in need or anyone for whom I felt a kinship. But hearing you, I don't know what you sound like when you're meaning every word you say, much less meaning every one for me. Convince me. I'm the one who's listening, after all, instead of having lunch. I've paused my life so you can have your say.
That's a high standard you perform to, Al.
That's the goal. You don't get there every time.
Yeah. Something that has the chutzpah to make somebody avoid their lunch.
Well, avoid it is one thing you can do with your lunch.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's about whatever gives the singer authority.
Yeah.
I always think of it as essentially an acting challenge, that you've got to create the dramatic situation of the person in the song. Might not be you, but you've got to be convincing. It's just like a little 3-minute play.
You know, Al, in some of your poems, in this one in particular, you have a dramatic voice where you become a character. This reminds me also of the poem. Al and I met in a workshop, a dramatic monologue at the Westchester Poetry Conference, taught by David Mason. And Al really assumed the character, and everybody loved that one. And I hear it in this poem too, similar voice, kind of a didactic voice a little bit, telling a story, teaching a lesson.
I think it's the fun Oh, go ahead.
I like how the poem sort of performs what it's saying, because the poem gives you that voice of the person that you want to listen to and avoid your lunch or what have you. So it's sort of demonstrating what it is asking, which is a very difficult trick, I think.
Well, thank you. That's the hope, that people will buy whatever you're selling.
And it's an Ars Poetica.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
It is. Well, very nice. So but really, after that Cyndi Lauper poem, David, that's exactly what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to follow Otis Redding, who was an absolute master at convincing you that he meant what he was singing, it's a good illustration. I'm last in the line, so that brings you to the front.
I'm now in sort of a quandary because I have my list of things, but I don't have so many poems that are about song exactly.
Well, just switch direction. That's fine too.
Okay. Well, it turns out that my years in orchestra, I think, had provided a lot of poems. And this maybe loops around back to that idea of listening to music with children or through children, perhaps. So this is called Listening to Peter and the Wolf with Jason, age 3. He's now 16 and very tall and would be probably embarrassed if he were paying attention. And it, again, based on quite literal experience, as so many poems are, just he would want to listen to Peter and the Wolf every single day, but it also frightened him. And so I would have to be in there with him. And it was scarier for him, I think, than movies or so forth, because, somehow there's more imaginative play when you're not seeing images with it. Eyes wide open, grinning ear to ear, balanced between the thrill of fear and fear. He clutches at my skirt to keep me near and will not let me leave him by himself in the living room where Peter and the Wolf emerges from the speakers on the shelf. He likes Peter's jaunty swing of strings, the reedy waddle of the duck, the wings that flute up in the tree, but still he clings, even though for now it's just the cat picking its sneaky way through sharp and flat. He isn't frightened of a clarinet and laughs at grandfather's bluster and bassoon, but keeps his ear out for another tune at the shadowy edge of the wood and coming soon. Where is the wolf? He asks me every chance he gets, and I explain each circumstance, though it's not as if he's heard it only once. You'd think he'd know by now. Deep in the wood, or under the tree or sent away for good to the zoo, I say, and think he's understood. And weary of the question and the classic, I ask him where the wolf is. With grave logic, he answers me, the wolf is in the music. And so it is, just then, out of the gloom, the cymbal menaces, the French horns loom, and the music is loose. The music's in the room.
There's the devil again, in the middle, taking control of the poem.
It's in there.
Wow. Wow. And he really said that it's 3 or 4?
Yeah, I mean, a 3-year-old can beat a poet with one hand tied behind their back at any turn, but you can steal from them, so that's good.
That's why I haven't had children. I don't need the competition. Wow. David, sir.
Yeah, all sorts of things going through my head, as wonderful poems do to you. So the devil and the like. This poem was the original one I wanted to read in response to Alicia's "Why Does the Devil Get All the Good Tunes?" There's a certain orneriness to that poem, and there's a certain orneriness to this poem, which is also on a somewhat religious theme. It's based on an idea from a 3rd century, 4th century Hebrew mystical hymn, and it's this belief that there's a mythology that it follows, which is called somewhat throne worship. So God is envisioned in the heavens with a heavenly host around him, and hymns are sung in synagogue, in the rude synagogues they had then. But there's a wonderful teaching that says the angels can't begin to sing. In other words, the world can't begin until the people in the synagogue start to sing. So there's a control of God by man. It's a short poem, and I was thinking there are bears in this poem like wolves, and so this is called The Standoff. It has an epigraph from T. Carmi, the Penguin Book of Hebrew Verse. The angelic hosts are not permitted to sing in heaven before the congregation of Israel has begun to sing on earth. Faces in the heavenly choir await the minions' lower fire. Fish cannot swim, they cannot eat, until an elder stirs from a seat. The bears are low, they hate the sky. They will not let the moon go by. The whirligig abhors the dark. The lower hates the higher spark. No wind, no light, no moon, no air. A stubborn hush refuses prayer. They will not say a single thing. They know they can contain the king. The miracle is born in anger. The irate infant will not linger. No passage in the Father's book prepared him for this sullen look. So
Music.
we ain't gonna sing. You ain't doing nothing until we start.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful music to that poem. It had almost like that magic of nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
With the paradoxes.
Yeah, your poem made me think of that.
Wow, very nice. This is exactly the kind of thing that I hope for in getting people together, is that like a real chamber music performance, you listen to each other and you react the whole way through. So that it isn't like you've got something set in stone and you're simply presenting it. So I've got one more that's on the surface of it is about classical music once again, but it's actually at a different level about time, the passage of it and the chopping it up and the nature of recording and what that means. I wrote it on New Year's Day in 2015. And as an introduction to it, I would say that it speaks about listening to a recording made by Alfred Cortot, the Swiss pianist, in 1938 of Schumann's piece, Der Vogel als Prophet, the prophet bird. Cortot is one of the greatest Schumann interpreters. And this particular New Year's Eve, I was listening to this piece because there's a great and deep mystery in his recording. There's an epigraph to the poem. It's a quote from Einstein. The distinction between past, present, and future is only an illusion, however persistent. Deep in the old year's final hour, I sit, my thoughts on friends who passed under the number. Der Vogel als Prophet fills in the dark, its forest palpable here in this room. Dimmed by the mechanism used to save it, the shade of Cortot takes the shape of Schumann. Each note across the flitting figures given its own tint. The bird is bodied out in variegated tones and tells of time suspended. Shading in the mystery, the sound is ancient and immediate. The past is no more gone than we are, no more here than we are. In 3 minutes at the keyboard in the last mid-century, Cortot walks in Schumann's forest from a century before and brings back proof. The Menomosso central section speaks in gliding tongues of what is yet to come to all of us within the mystery. The fluttering resumes without a warning. In a minute, there's just the noise of the machine. The clock hands stand straight up. The year is turned while I have been away. And just also in passing, Der Vogel als Prophet is one of the poems in the collection that Schumann called Waldszenen, which is the title of this poem. And Waldszenen means forest scenes. So it's all about the bird in the forest.
Mm. It's very elegiac, very...
I get that way on New Year's Eve somehow.
I think we all do. Because
I'm going to be relieved this New Year's Eve, I think.
Yeah, let's blame it on Burns.
Just to be done with this year, I'll be happy.
Oh yeah.
The poem I'd wanted to end on is actually kind of about time also. So I think that naturally works very, very well.
Good.
And it's about an essential element of music, and it's a sonnet, and it's called silence. I think we often underestimate the importance of silence to music. Silence has its own notation, dark jottings of duration, but not pitch, a long black box or little feathered hitch, like a new Greek letter or diacritical mark. Silence is a function of time, the lark in flight but not in song, a nothing which keeps secrets or confesses, pregnant, rich, or awkward, cold, the pause that makes us hark, the space before or after. It's the room in which melody moves, the medium through which thought travels. It is golden, best, welcome relief to talk-worn tedium. Before the word itself, it was the womb. It has a measure. Music calls it rest.
Wow.
You know, Miles Davis said the music isn't just in the notes, it's in the silence between the notes, or the space between the notes is what he said. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Do you have a take on John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds? It's really designed to make you listen to what's going on during the silence. There's always something.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that was a very natural segue. Thank you.
So Al, I'm pondering. I'll take a request. Thelonious Monk, Ira Gershwin, or Ira Gershwin.
I concede to the lady's wishes.
Oh,
I'll throw in Cole Porter if you're.
Oh dear. I was gonna say Monk, maybe.
Okay, it's the shortest one. It's good. It's a good choice.
I know these poems; they're all good, so you couldn't have guessed wrong.
It's a trick question.
Well, Al was talking about Otis and meaning what he's saying. How meaning pushes through the actual music of what you're doing, and I think this is what you get in Monk. Although there are no words until words added later, there's a kind of almost verbal insistence in Monk that you hear. And I like to do the reverse and like to get a musical insistence in the poetry. I mean, not prosody, but actual feeling of music, the art of music. So there's this song that Monk does called I Mean You. And there is such an insistence of those three notes. Yes. I mean you. And that is so bad. Right. So you think that it has to be the syllables driving. So this drives this poem. This whippoorwill somehow that came up in the Johnny Mercer poem somehow comes up again, and three notes come up again. I mean you. Listen to me, the whippoorwill says, driving its tune. I mean you, Monk insists, the three notes married to the three words, singling out someone. That's someone who knows who she is, who will understand from her hidden place that the man is pointing to her and meaning it. Should she forget, he will repeat that he means her, chooses her from among the shy girls at the dance floor's edge. The single man with the hard hands, the man with the power, meaning her, choosing her. No, not you or you, I mean you. By that he means not anyone else. By that he means to distinguish, to choose and mean a mate, the only mate, the Eve his body knows and insists upon, meaning the bone from his only body. I mean you. I mean you. I mean you.
Thank you. Did he write that for Nellie, his wife? Do you
I
know?
don't even know. I don't know.
They were a famous couple. I mean, he wrote
Yeah.
one of his pieces. It's called
Could be.
Crepuscule with Nellie.
Yes. Yes, I forget. There's a dance. They met at a dance, I think, at a country dance, I think.
That's great.
I'm
Yeah,
not
well,
sure.
he was from South Carolina, right?
Yeah, but he studied at Juilliard. Right. You'd never know. Well, you would know, but he knew his fundamentals. But.
Wow. Yeah, Monk's a titanic figure. It's great that you chose the Monk one, just from a selfish point of view for me, because I'm going to end things with the poem that has to do with Louis Armstrong. And, you know, that's, there is no more natural segue than from anybody in jazz to Louis Armstrong. One of the greatest days of my life occurred about 10 years ago when I went to the Armstrong archives at Queens College on Long Island and played one of his trumpets. Now,
Wow.
Yeah, Louis Armstrong is my pole star, as not just as a trumpet player, but really as a musician, as an improviser, as a singer. Everything that he did was exemplary. And I've spent 50 years trying to learn as much as I could. It's an interesting position to be in if you're a trumpet player of my particular tastes, because you know that you will never be that good. No matter how much you learn and how much you rise, he's always got a more profound approach to what he's doing than you're going to manage. What you try to do is find your own way that's at least more yours than anyone else, even his. And that's what this poem has to do with. It's called, prosaically enough, I Play One of Louis Armstrong's Trumpets. Armstrong Archives, Queens College, April 20th, 2010. Unearthed out of a safe for the occasion, a 50s-looking suitcase is unlatched, its tan lid lifted to reveal a row of golden trumpets, each in its compartment. 3 Paris Selmers and a lone LeBlanc. Their inlaid valve caps pearly and concave to fit the fingertips, though often Pops played off his second knuckles, so his fingers would fly up straight as though to testify. I take one of the Selmers in my hands. I've heard it said that people were surprised to find his horns were ordinary issue. No trick or secret wrinkle in design accounted for the sound that leapt or purred in gliss or open tone out of the metal. But breath and spirit moving in the flesh would animate, and lips and horn alike would warm and vibrate, shaking loose a sound as personal as any fingerprint. So I will try, while trying not to think of everything this instrument remembers. For me, the man was not content to scale the highest peaks of music every night. He built each one as he was climbing it, while wearing down his body to the ground in almost 60 years of mortal struggle. From Waif's home to the end, he fought the horn. The trumpet always knows that it will win in one of your tomorrows. But today, if you can make it, it will take you up. I set the mouthpiece I have brought. The horn is solid, pipes a little tighter than my benge. I breathe through it a while to warm it, buzz my lips to wake them up, and place them up against the mouthpiece rim. Then scales, the same ones I've played since I was 8, and every day the same for 50 years. Do you have to practice to be good? When Ruby Braff was asked that question once, he said, and I can almost hear the sneer, you gotta practice to be bad. I start with phrases testing the response, the way the horn takes orders, where it helps me out, on glisses, which it slides through on my side, and where it fights me. I would need more time to fix my diaphragm and get my top. Then some melodies. Was I to blame? Red sails in the sunset and tin roof blues. Then melody around the melody. My sound begins to center as my body starts to get in line behind the horn. So I play while we're dancing, one of mine. Miles said once that there's nothing on the horn that you can play that Lewis hasn't played. It's likely he was right. And when I wrote that melody, I had the 50s pops in mind. But since I had the chance to leave that Selmer with a memory of my own, I had to try. I played it, and the tone, the phrasing, and the melody were mine. My second knuckles pushed down on the valves. My fingertips flew up to testify. Thank you very much.
You know, that's a real good object lesson for these musicians who talk endlessly about their gear, as if the gear was the thing. You know, you hear that constantly, and it enrages me because I don't know any of the lingo. But this poem shows, tells, evokes how the gear, a magician like Lewis, it can make it. It isn't about the gear, you know. It isn't about the thing, that thing itself. Also, you have a great sense for these quotes from these musicians.
Well, musicians are famous for their quotes, and the truth of what you said, by the way, it's particularly true of guitar players. They're endlessly going over their equipment, how they set it up, the bridge, you know, what strings they use, amplifiers, etc.
Les Paul and Mary Ford and so.
Yeah, but it's always been true. And there's a famous quote from Franz Liszt, who reputedly was asked to play a piano, which, as it turned out, was out of tune. And he went over to it and he said, "I make the sound." I'm sure this was a kind of hypnosis that made the people listening think the piano was more in tune than it was. But then, isn't all performance a kind of hypnosis?
Yeah, that's sort of what the hip poem is about too. About this obsession with this kind of rigid technique, or the instruments themselves, you know, and so
they always want it to be something that you can go out and buy.
Yeah.
I wonder where that idea comes from.
I love how the poem ends on the gesture. I think that's it's so visual as well, that, you know, on top of hearing the things, that beautiful gesture of the fingers.
Yeah.
Well, I make such a point of saying that it's nice to read my stuff on the page, but that there's something more that you get by hearing it performed. But you're pointing out something else that's true, which is there's a visual aid that you can apply when you're reading, and there's really no reason not to. So yeah, that's thanks for noticing that. It comes across pretty well on this little camera too, which is nice because you're focused in. But this has been wonderful. You two are predictably extraordinary.
I was worried
But-
you were going to say predictable.
No, 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 no.
Be dyslexic and say extraordinarily predictable.
No, no, I knew I was going to get something terrific, but of course, the beauty of it is you don't know exactly what. So this is great. I especially like that perhaps you read poems that you might not otherwise read in a more conventional reading. And because we all have a lot more somewhere that we can trot out, you know, in a public reading. So
It was really nice to hear the
Sure.
poems tuning to each other and
well, that's what
Harmonizing.
we're able to make happen, which is terrific. That's the kind of, again, that's the kind of push-pull that I really hope for. And I knew both of you would have did not live your lives and write only 5 poems that have to do with music.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to make a turn, you had the resources to do so. So
There you go.
this is wonderful. I know the vaccine is just tipping on the horizon. Maybe in another year we'll be able to see each other together in a room, but for the imposition of the times, this was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so
Thank you
much
for
for making it happen. You're a band leader in many ways.
Maestro.
Remember, the sidemen are there to make me look good.
Oh, wow. Am I playing?
Okay, I'm going to end this, but this is wonderful, and I'm going to go upstairs and start shoveling a foot of snow. I'm glad,
Oh.
Alicia, you don't have to do that. And you're in Manhattan, David. It'll melt quicker where you are.
Yeah, the mayor makes it like that. Yeah, wonderful to see you, Alicia, out
It's
there.
great to see you and
Yeah.
have a social evening.
Yes.
This is- yeah.
Oh, it's evening, right? This is lunch, pre-lunch, brunch.
Well, you know, you didn't have to get on a plane to be with us, so
Yes.
there's something in that, at least.
I can't blame anything on jet lag.
Al, don't shovel too fast is the word. It's heavy, the snow. So don't slow. Zen.
Well, as Muhammad Ali liked to say, and I think he might have said it to me, you know, you're smarter than you look. So I hear you and I obey.
Okay. Take it
Okay,
easy.
signing off, folks.
Okay, good to see you. Have a
Yeah,
good
always.
holidays.
Thank you, and likewise. And next year, better times ahead, I promise.
Oh,
Okay, so long.
bye.